Everyone at the Obsidian Room, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, thought they knew how the world worked. Money talks, and appearance is everything. When a man in a faded, oversized army coat sat in the corner, the staff laughed. They mocked his boots. They ignored his empty glass. They thought he was a confused tourist or a vagrant who wandered in from the cold. They were wrong. Dead wrong. They didn't know that the man they were sneering at could buy the entire city block with a signature. And they definitely didn't expect the quiet, overworked waitress to be the only one who could unlock his secrets and seal their fate. This is the story of how a little kindness and a hidden skill toppled an empire. The rain in New York City didn't wash things clean, it just made the grit slicker. Claire pushed a strand of damp blonde hair out of her face as she tightened her apron strings. She was standing in the service alley of the Obsidian Room, taking a deep breath before stepping onto the floor. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant, it was a theater of wealth. Located on the 45th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park, it was the kind of place where a bottle of wine cost more than Claire's rent for 6 months. The walls were lined with black velvet. The chandeliers were genuine Swarovski, and the cutlery was heavy enough to be a weapon. "Claire, move it!" The snap of fingers made her flinch. It was Jacob, the floor manager. Jacob was a man who wore suits that were too tight and a cologne that smelled like desperate ambition. He hated Claire. He hated that she was quiet. He hated that she took the bus from Queens, and he hated that she refused to flirt with the older clientele to upsell the caviar. "I'm ready, Jacob," Claire said, her voice steady. "Table 4 needs water. Table 7 wants to send back the risotto because it looks sad." "Deal with it," Jacob sneered, checking his reflection in a polished brass railing. "And try to look less like a drowned rat. We have VIPs coming in tonight. The Sterling merger is happening here. If you embarrass me, you're out. No severance." Claire nodded and hurried onto the floor. She needed this job. Her mother's medical bills were piling up on the kitchen counter like snowdrifts, and her student loans from her unfinished degree were gathering interest. She had been a linguistics major, top of her class, fascinated by the structure of Slavic and Germanic languages. She had dreamed of being a translator for the UN. But dreams don't pay for dialysis. So, she dropped out, and now she translated the grunts of hungry billionaires into orders for Wagyu beef. The dinner rush was brutal. The restaurant was filled with the usual suspects: hedge fund managers shouting into phones, socialites picking at salads, and tourists who looked terrified of the prices. Claire moved like a ghost, refilling glasses and clearing plates. She was invisible. That was the rule of high-end service. Be present, but absent. Around 8 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. The heavy oak doors at the entrance swung open, but instead of the expected entourage of the Sterling Group, the massive private equity firm expected to buy out a tech giant tonight, a single figure walked in. He was a jarring sight against the gold and black decor. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, wearing a thick, charcoal-grey wool coat that looked decades old. It was frayed at the cuffs. His boots were heavy leather, scuffed and wet from the rain. He had a thick beard, peppered with grey, and eyes that looked like chipped ice. He didn't wait to be seated. He walked with a heavy, deliberate gait toward a small, secluded table near the back window, the worst table in the house, usually reserved for solo diners or people the staff wanted to hide. Jacob spotted him immediately. His face twisted into a mask of disgust. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Jacob hissed to Jessica, the head hostess. "How did security let him up? He looks like a dock worker." I don't know," Jessica stammered. "He just walked past the lift guard." "Get him out," Jacob ordered. The Sterling party is arriving in 20 minutes. I don't want that thing ruining the aesthetic." Clare watched from the service station. She saw something Jacob didn't. The man wasn't slouching. He sat with a rigid military posture. He wasn't looking around in awe of the luxury. He was scanning the room with bored indifference. He looked tired, yes, but not lost. "I'll handle it," Jacob muttered, adjusting his tie. He marched over to the table where the man had just taken a seat. Clare moved closer, pretending to polish a stack of menus, her heart thumping. She hated confrontation, but she couldn't look away. Jacob stopped at the edge of the table, not bothering to offer a menu. He crossed his arms. "Sir," Jacob said, his voice dripping with faux politeness that was sharper than a knife, "I believe you are in the wrong establishment. The diner is 3 blocks down on 6th Avenue. The large man didn't look up. He was staring out the window at the rain-lashed city lights. He slowly unbuttoned his heavy coat, revealing a simple black turtleneck underneath. No watch. No jewelry. "I stay here," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and heavily accented. It was a thick, unmistakable Russian growl. Jacob rolled his eyes. "Look, pal, this is a reservation-only establishment, and we have a dress code, strict jacket required. You are not meeting the standards." The man finally turned his head, his eyes locked onto Jacob's. For a second, Jacob flinched. There was a terrifying stillness in the stranger's gaze. It wasn't anger. It was the look a lion gives a buzzing fly. "I want tea," the man said. "Black. No sugar." "We don't serve just tea," Jacob snapped, his patience evaporating. "Minimum spend per head is $200. Unless you plan on buying a bottle of Dom Perignon, you need to leave. Now, before I call security to drag you out." The restaurant had gone quiet. A few nearby tables, a young couple and a group of bankers, were watching, snickering behind their hands. They were enjoying the show, the poor man being kicked out of the rich man's playground. The Russian man sighed, a heavy, weary sound. He reached into his coat pocket. Jacob stepped back, perhaps fearing a weapon, but the man only pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes, realized he couldn't smoke, and put them back. "I wait for friend," the Russian said. His English was broken, clunky. "He comes soon. We eat then." "I don't care if you're waiting for the Pope," Jacob said, raising his voice so the nearby tables could admire his authority. "You are bad for business. You are disturbing my guests. Get out." Clare couldn't stand it anymore. It was the look in the man's eyes, not fear, but a deep, simmering resignation, as if he was used to being misunderstood, or perhaps he just didn't have the energy to fight a man as small as Jacob. Clare stepped forward, bypassing the service hierarchy. "Jacob," she said softly. Jacob whipped around. "What do you want, Clare? Can't you see I'm taking out the trash?" "I'll take the table," Clare said quietly. "He's not bothering anyone. He's in the corner. If the Sterling party comes, they won't even see him." "He's taking up a seat," Jacob hissed. "I'll make sure he spends the minimum," Clare lied. "Please. If you make a scene, the other guests will get upset. It's better to just let him sit." Jacob looked at the man, then at the clock. The Sterling Group, led by the notorious CEO Robert Sterling, was due in 15 minutes. A scene involving security guards dragging a man out would indeed look messy. "Fine," Jacob spat. "He's your problem. But if he doesn't pay, it's coming out of your tips, all of them, for the month." "Understood," Clare said. Jacob leaned in close to the Russian man. "You're lucky she has a bleeding heart. Don't make a mess." He spun on his heel and stormed off to greet the arriving VIPs at the front podium. Clare took a breath and approached the table. The man was looking out the window again. Up close, she saw the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. He looked like he carried the weight of the world. She set a glass of water down gently. "Good evening," she said, keeping her voice professional but warm. "May I get you that tea?" The man looked at her. He seemed surprised that she was looking at him, not through him. "Tea," he repeated. "Black." "Of course," Claire said. Then she paused. She saw him rub his temple, a gesture of a headache or stress. She glanced around to make sure Jacob was out of earshot. She took a risk. She dropped her voice and spoke, the sounds foreign and guttural to anyone else, but fluid and familiar to her. "Viviglia dit tak, butto uvas bil dolgi den. Ja prinesu vam ktonibud krepkoje chaju. You look like you have had a long day. Shall I bring you something strong with the tea?" The man's head snapped up. The ice in his eyes shattered, replaced by shock. He stared at the young waitress in the generic black uniform. "Ty govorish po-ruski?" "You speak Russian?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp, commanding. Claire smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Moja babushka bila iz Odessy. Ona naučila menia." "My grandmother was from Odessa. She taught me." The man studied her face for a long moment. The tension in his shoulders dropped an inch. For the first time, he looked human. "Vodka," he said, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. "Beluga, if you have." "We have," Claire replied in Russian, "and I will make sure the manager does not bother you again." "Thank you," he said, switching back to English, but his tone was different now. It was respectful. "I am Nikolai." "I'm Claire," she replied. As she walked away to fetch the order, she didn't notice Nikolai watching her, a contemplative look on his face. She also didn't notice him pull a phone from his pocket, a sleek, customized device that looked more like military hardware than a smartphone, and type a short message. She was just trying to survive the shift. She had no idea that by acknowledging him in his own tongue, she had just turned the key in a lock that guarded billions of dollars. Claire returned with a pot of Earl Grey and a chilled shot of Beluga Gold Line vodka on a silver tray. It was the most expensive vodka they had, usually reserved for bottle service, but she poured him a single glass. As she set it down, the atmosphere in the restaurant changed abruptly. The air grew tense, the noise level dropped. At the entrance, Jacob was bowing so low he looked like he might snap in half. Robert Sterling had arrived. Sterling was the epitome of New York power. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, tanned from weekends in the Hamptons, wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than a car. He was flanked by 3 other men, his associates, Chad, Brad, and Lewis. They were younger, louder versions of Sterling, laughing obnoxiously as they handed their coats to the trembling hostess. "Jacob, my boy," Sterling announced, his voice booming. "I hope our table is ready. We have a very unpredictable investor joining us later. I want everything perfect." "Mr. Sterling, of course." Jacob beamed, sweating. "Table 1, by the fireplace. The best view in the house. We have the 82 Latour breathing for you right now." "Excellent," Sterling said. He strode into the dining room, owning the space. As the group passed the secluded corner where Nikolai sat, Chad, the youngest and most arrogant of the group, stopped. He nudged Brad. "Whoa, look at that!" Chad laughed loudly, pointing openly at Nikolai. "Did they start letting the janitors eat in the dining room?" Nikolai didn't flinch. He slowly sipped his tea, his back to them. Sterling glanced over, wrinkling his nose. "Jacob, what is that?" Jacob rushed over, his face pale. "I apologize, Mr. Sterling. A booking error. A tourist. He's leaving shortly. I didn't want to cause a scene before your arrival." "Well, keep him away from us," Sterling muttered. We're meeting the chaotic, silent partner regarding the acquisition of the Petro-Valkov refineries. I don't want some hobo staring at us while we discuss billion-dollar figures." "Of course, sir. Immediately." They sat at the prime table, loud and boisterous. Claire was assigned to their section because she was the most efficient, though Jacob warned her, "Don't speak unless spoken to. These men are important." Claire approached the Sterling table to pour water. "Hey, sweetheart," Chad said, leering at her without looking at her face. "Bring us the seafood tower, and keep the scotch coming. The good stuff." "Yes, sir," Claire said. "And hey," Chad grabbed her wrist as she turned. "Who is the bum in the corner? Seriously. Does he smell?" Claire pulled her wrist back firmly. "That is a guest, sir." "A guest?" Chad laughed, looking at the table. "He looks like he's about to ask me for change." "Focus, Chad," Sterling snapped. "The Russian investor, Mr. Volkov, is notoriously difficult. Nobody knows what he looks like. He sends proxies, usually. But the email said he might make an appearance tonight to sign the final deed. We need to be sharp." "Russians," Brad scoffed. "Probably wearing a tracksuit and gold chains, right?" "Who cares what he wears?" Sterling said, lowering his voice. "We're going to fleece him. The valuation papers we prepared? They omit the environmental liabilities in the Siberia plant. By the time he translates the fine print, we'll own the controlling stake and he'll be stuck with the cleanup costs." Claire froze while pouring the wine. They were openly discussing fraud. "Careful with the pour, honey," Sterling snapped at her. "You're listening too hard. This is grown-up talk." Claire finished pouring and stepped back, her stomach churning. She glanced over at Nikolai in the corner. He was sipping his vodka, his eyes closed, listening. But he was too far away to hear them, wasn't he? Claire went back to Nikolai's table to refill his teapot. "Is everything all right?" she asked in Russian, her voice low. "Those men, they are very loud." Nikolai opened his eyes. They were sharp, intelligent. "Men who speak loud usually have nothing to say," Nikolai replied in Russian. "Tell me, Claire, what are they drinking?" "Chateau Latour, 1982, she replied. "Good wine," Nikolai nodded. "Wasted on swine." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a heavy, black titanium credit card. It had no numbers on it, just a small gold chip and a signature. "Claire," he said, switching to English. "I want to buy a bottle, the same one they're drinking." Claire blinked. "Sir, that bottle it's $5,000. Nikolai smiled. It was a wolf's smile. "I know. Bring it. And bring 2 glasses. 2? Yes. 1 for me. And 1 for later." Claire took the card, her hands shaking slightly. She walked to the POS terminal. Jacob saw her. "What are you doing?" Jacob demanded. "Table 12 ordered the Latour," Claire said. Jacob laughed out loud. "The bum ordered the Latour. Did he give you a library card?" "He gave me this." Claire held up the black titanium card. Jacob stopped laughing. He snatched the card. He looked at it. He swiped it, expecting a decline sound that would echo through the hall. Beep. Approved. The machine spat out a receipt. Jacob stared at it. It cleared, Jacob whispered. He looked at the card again. "Wait, there's no name on the front. Just a symbol." "Can I take the wine, Jacob?" Claire asked. Jacob handed the card back, looking dazed. "Fine. Take it." "Maybe he stole it. If the cops come, it's on you." Claire brought the vintage wine to Nikolai. He nodded his thanks. He didn't drink it immediately. He just let it breathe, sitting there like a statue, watching the loud table of men who were planning to rob a Russian blind, totally unaware that the predator was already in the room. The clock struck 8:30 p.m. The rain outside had turned into a deluge, hammering against the reinforced glass of the skyscraper. Inside, the tension at table 1 was reaching a boiling point. Robert Sterling checked his Patek Philippe watch for the 10th time. "Where the hell is he?" he barked. "Volkov's assistant said 8:30 sharp. I don't wait for people. People wait for me." "Maybe he got held up at the airport?" Chad suggested, loosening his tie. He was already 3 glasses of wine deep, and his face was flushing a blotchy red. "He's Russian," Brad sneered. "Probably got distracted by a bottle of vodka." Claire approached the table to clear the appetizer plates. She tried to be invisible, but in a mood like this, invisibility was impossible. Sterling was looking for a target to vent his frustration on. "You!" Sterling snapped, pointing a breadstick at Claire. "Girl, did anyone ask for you at the front? A Mr. Volkov?" "No, sir," Claire replied softly. "No one by that name." "Useless," Sterling muttered. He looked over Claire's shoulder, and his eyes narrowed. He was staring at the corner table again. Nikolai was pouring himself a second glass of the Chateau Latour. The bottle sat prominently on his table, the label catching the dim light. "Is that—" Sterling squinted. "Is that my wine?" Chad whipped around. "Hey, that bum is drinking the 82 Latour. Jacob said we got the last bottle from the cellar." Sterling's face went purple. It wasn't about the wine. It was about the hierarchy. A man in a frayed coat was drinking a vintage that Sterling had to be put on a waiting list to access. It was an insult to the natural order of his world. "Jacob!" Sterling roared. Jacob materialized instantly, looking like a deer in headlights. "Yes, Mr. Sterling?" "Why is that vagrant drinking my vintage?" Sterling demanded, his voice carrying across the restaurant. Other diners stopped eating. "I specifically asked for 2 bottles. You said you only had 1. And now I see it on the table of a man who looks like he sleeps in a subway station." "Sir, Jacob stammered, looking at Claire with hatred. "He paid for it. His card. It cleared. I don't care if he paid with gold bullion." Sterling slammed his hand on the table. "It ruins my appetite. Go over there, take the bottle, and bring it here. Tell him I'm buying it off him. Give him $100 for his trouble. He'll probably be grateful for the cash." Jacob hesitated. "Sir, I can't just take a guest's wine." "Do it, or I buy this building and fire you tomorrow," Sterling threatened calmly. Jacob swallowed hard. He turned to Claire. You served him. You go get it." Claire's eyes widened. "Jacob, I can't. That's theft." "It's hospitality management," Jacob hissed. "Go ask him to relinquish the bottle for the VIPs. Offer him a complimentary dessert. Just get the wine off his table." Claire felt sick. She looked at Nikolai. He was watching the scene unfold with that same detached, icy interest. He knew exactly what was happening. Slowly, Claire walked over to Nikolai's table. Her hands were trembling. "Sir," she whispered, I am so sorry." Nikolai looked up at her. His expression softened when he looked at her, contrasting sharply with the glare he had for the room. "They sent you to do their dirty work?" he asked in Russian. "Yes," Claire replied in Russian, tears pricking her eyes. "They want the wine. The man in the blue suit. He is very powerful. My manager is afraid." Nikolai picked up the bottle. It was still half full. He looked at it, then at Sterling. Sterling smirked, raising his glass in a mock toast, expecting the bum to surrender the prize. Nikolai poured the remaining contents of the $5,000 bottle into his water glass. Then he deliberately tipped the empty bottle over on the table. It rolled with a hollow thud. He looked at Claire. "Tell them the bottle is empty, but if they want the dregs, they can come lap it up from my glass like dogs." Claire gasped. She couldn't say that. She turned back to Jacob and Sterling. He finished it, sir." Sterling stood up. The vein in his forehead was throbbing. This was no longer about business. It was about dominance. "You're lying!" Sterling spat at Clare. He marched over to Nikolai's table, with Chad and Brad trailing behind like hyenas. Sterling loomed over the seated Nikolai. "Listen to me, you piece of filth. I don't know who you robbed to get that credit card, but you are in my breathing space. I am Robert Sterling. I own half this city, and I want you out." Nikolai slowly buttered a piece of bread. He didn't even blink. Chad, emboldened by his boss, stepped forward and kicked the leg of Nikolai's chair. "Hey, he's talking to you. Show some respect." That was the mistake. In a blur of motion, Nikolai's hand shot out. He didn't stand up. He simply grabbed Chad's wrist, the one wearing a flashy Rolex, and squeezed. Chad screamed. It was a high-pitched, embarrassing sound. Nikolai twisted the wrist slightly, forcing Chad to his knees. The restaurant went dead silent. "Let him go!" Sterling shouted, backing away in genuine fear. "Security! Call the police!" Nikolai released Chad, who scrambled back, cradling his arm. Nikolai wiped his hand on a napkin, as if he had touched something slimy. Then Nikolai stood up. He was massive. Seated, he looked big. Standing, he was a mountain. He towered over Sterling. He fixed his collar, buttoned his frayed coat, and looked down at the billionaire. "You wait for Volkov?" Nikolai said in heavily broken English, his voice booming like thunder in the quiet room. Sterling froze. "What? How do you know that name?" "I am Volkov," Nikolai said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Sterling blinked. He looked at the frayed coat, the boots, the beard. Then he looked at Jacob, then back at Nikolai. "You," Sterling laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. "You are Nikolai Volkov, the CEO of Petrovalkov, the Iron Wolf of Siberia?" "Yes." "Bullshit," Sterling spat. "Volkov is a billionaire, a refined man. You look like a tractor mechanic. You're a fraud, a con artist who overheard us talking." Nikolai didn't argue. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out the phone again. He pressed one button. The large TV screens above the bar, which were playing a muted news channel, suddenly flickered. The channel changed. It showed a live feed of the street outside the building. A convoy of black SUVs had just pulled up. Men in suits with earpieces were swarming the entrance. But they weren't coming in. They were standing guard around a massive black limousine that flew the Russian diplomatic flag. Nikolai looked at Sterling. "My security is downstairs. I prefer to eat alone. I wanted to see who I was doing business with before I signed." He paused, his eyes drilling into Sterling's soul. "And now I see." Sterling's face went from red to ash-white. If this was Volkov, Sterling had just insulted the man who held the keys to the biggest energy deal of the decade. He had to pivot. He had to salvage this. "Mr. Volkov!" Sterling's voice cracked, shifting instantly into a sycophantic purr. "My apologies. We had no idea. It's a misunderstanding. A joke. We embrace a casual atmosphere here. Please join us. Let me order you a fresh bottle." "The 45. Sterling gestured frantically to the empty chair at the head of his table. Nikolai didn't move. He looked at the chair, then at Sterling, with utter contempt. He spoke, but not in English. He unleashed a rapid-fire stream of Russian, his voice cold and hard. "Я лучше, чем свою обувь, кем сяду за стол с таким бесчестным человеком, как ты." Sterling stood there, his smile frozen. I'm sorry. My Russian is a little rusty. Haha. Nikolai stared at him. He refused to switch to English. He turned his head and looked directly at Clare, who was cowering near the service station. "Clare!" Nikolai called out. His voice was gentle when he said her name, but it carried authority. "Come here." Clare stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Yes, sir?" "Stand next to me," Nikolai said in English. Then he switched back to Russian. "From now on, you are my voice. These men are not worth the effort of my English. Translate everything I say. Exact words. Do not soften them." Clare looked at Jacob. Jacob was nodding frantically, signaling her to do whatever the billionaire wanted. "Yes, sir," Clare said. Nikolai turned back to Sterling. He crossed his arms and spoke in Russian. "Tell him he looks like a pig who has been dressed in silk, but still smells of the sty." Clare hesitated. She looked at Sterling, one of the most powerful men in New York. "Translate," Nikolai commanded. Clare took a deep breath. She stood straighter. "Mr. Volkov says you look like a pig dressed in silk, but you still smell of the pigsty." The entire restaurant gasped. Someone in the back dropped a fork. Sterling's jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" Nikolai continued, his eyes never leaving Sterling's. "Tell him I heard his conversation. Tell him I heard about the environmental liabilities he planned to hide. Tell him I heard he plans to fleece me." Clare translated, her voice gaining strength. "Mr. Volkov heard your conversation earlier. He heard about the environmental liabilities you hid in the valuation papers, and he heard that you intended to fleece him." Sterling began to sweat profusely. "Now, wait a minute. That was just business banter. Misunderstood context." Nikolai took a step forward. Sterling took a step back. "Tell him that in Russia, when someone tries to steal from me, we do not call lawyers. We call undertakers." Clare felt a chill run down her spine, but she translated it flawlessly. "He says that in his country, when someone attempts to steal from him, they do not call lawyers. They call undertakers." Sterling was trembling now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a prey animal, realizing it has walked into a predator's den. "Mr. Volkov, please," Sterling stammered, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "We can renegotiate. I can offer you better terms. A 60-40 split. No, 70-30, anything you want." Nikolai laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "Ask him," Nikolai said to Clare, "why he thinks I need his money. I have more money in my coat pocket than his entire firm is worth," Clare translated. "He asks why you think he needs your money. He has more in his pocket than your firm is worth." Nikolai reached into his frayed coat. He pulled out a folded document. It was the contract Sterling had sent over earlier that week. "This is the deal?" Nikolai asked in English. "Yes. Yes." Sterling nodded eagerly. "We can amend it right now." Nikolai handed the document to Clare. "Read the clause on page 4, Clare. The one about the indemnity." Clare opened the document. Her hands were steady now. She had realized something. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the servant. She was the gatekeeper. She held the power because she held the language. "Clause 4.2, Clare read aloud. "The buyer assumes all historical debts and structural damages associated with the asset." "Stop," Nikolai said. He looked at Sterling. "You tried to sell me a sinking ship, hoping I would not notice the holes until I was underwater." Nikolai took the paper back from Clare. He didn't tear it. That would be too dramatic. Instead, he used it to wipe a smudge of dirt off his boot. Then he dropped it on the floor. "Clare," Nikolai said, ignoring Sterling completely. "Is the kitchen still open?" "Yes, sir," Clare said. "Good. I am hungry, but I will not eat with this trash." He gestured to Sterling. "Have security remove them." Sterling's eyes bugged out. "Remove us? I'm a VIP. I'm a member." Nikolai looked at Jacob, the manager. Jacob was shaking. "Manager, Nikolai said in English. "You want to keep your job?" Yes, Mr. Volkov, more than anything," Jacob squeaked. "Then get this garbage out of my sight, and bring me the menu. I want to dine with my translator." Jacob didn't hesitate. He knew where the real power lay. He turned to Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "You can't be serious!" Sterling screamed. "I'll sue you! I'll ruin you!" "Security!" Jacob yelled. 2 burly guards appeared. They had been waiting for a cue. They grabbed Sterling and his sputtering associates by the arms. As Sterling was dragged past Nikolai, he screamed, "You'll regret this! You don't know who I am!" Nikolai didn't even look at him. He was looking at Clare. "Sit, Clare," he said gently, pulling out the chair opposite him, the chair Sterling had wanted. "You have been standing all night. It is time you sat down." Clare looked at the empty restaurant floor, where the other waiters were staring in awe. She looked at Jacob, who gave her a terrified nod. Slowly, the waitress unfastened her apron. She folded it and placed it on the service station. Then she sat down across from the Russian billionaire. The silence in the restaurant was different now. It wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of fear and respect. The waiters who had previously ignored Clare were now hovering near the kitchen doors, watching with wide eyes. Jacob was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in his office, hyperventilating. Clare sat on the edge of the velvet chair. She felt out of place, her uniform stained with the night's work, sitting across from a man who could buy the skyline. Nikolai poured the wine. He filled her glass first, then his. "Drink," he said softly in English. "It is good wine. It tastes better when you know you took it from an enemy." Clare took a sip. It was rich, complex, and tasted like victory. "Mr. Volkov, why? Why did you do this?" Nikolai leaned back, breaking a piece of bread. "Please, call me Nikolai. And I did this because I was testing them. I needed to know if Sterling was a man of honor. He failed in 5 minutes." He looked at her intensely. "But you passed a test you didn't even know you were taking." "I was just doing my job," Clare said humbly. "No." Nikolai shook his head. "You saw a man who looked poor, who looked tired, and you gave him respect. You defended him against your own boss. That is not a job. That is character. Character is rare, Clare. Intelligence is common. Money is common. But a good heart? That is like a diamond in a coal mine." The food arrived. It wasn't the simple tea he had ordered before. The kitchen had sent out the chef's tasting menu: truffle risotto, seared scallops, Wagyu beef. The chef himself came out to place the plates down, trembling slightly. "Mr. Volkov," the chef stammered. "On the house. An honor to serve you." Nikolai just nodded. When the chef left, Nikolai looked at Clare. "Eat. You look too thin. They work you too hard here." As they ate, Nikolai asked her questions, not about the menu, but about her life. "Why do you speak my language?" he asked. "I studied linguistics," Clare admitted, her guard lowering as the wine warmed her. "I wanted to be a translator for the UN. I love how languages connect people. But life happened. Life. My mother got sick," Clare said, looking down at her plate. "Kidney failure. The insurance didn't cover everything. I had to drop out to pay the bills. This place? The tips are good, if you can swallow your pride." Nikolai listened. He didn't offer pity. He listened with the intensity of a general studying a map. "So you have a talent," Nikolai said. "A genius for language, and you are wasting it carrying plates for men like Sterling." "It pays the rent," Clare said defensively. "Does it?" Nikolai gestured to the window, to the city below. "I have a problem, Clare. I have a company that spans 12 time zones. I deal with Americans, Germans, Chinese. I have 1,000 lawyers and 100 advisors, but I have no one I can trust to tell me the truth." He leaned forward. "Everyone tells me what I want to hear because they are afraid of me, or they try to cheat me because they think I am just a rough Russian. I need a voice. I need someone who understands the words, but also the heart behind them. Someone who is not afraid to stand up to a bully." Claire stopped eating. Her heart began to pound again, harder than before. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Nikolai wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, "that I am firing you from this restaurant." Claire's face fell. "What?" "You are fired," Nikolai repeated sternly, "because you are hired by me." The silence that settled over the obsidian room following Robert Sterling's forcible ejection was heavy, but it was no longer oppressive. It was the silence of a vacuum left after a storm. The air, previously thick with pretension and the clinking of silverware, now hummed with a terrified reverence. Every waiter, busboy, and hostess was paralyzed, their eyes glued to the corner table where the vagrant sat dining with the help. Claire sat on the edge of the velvet chair, her spine rigid. She felt like an imposter in her own life. Across from her, Nikolai Volkov cut into a piece of Wagyu beef with the precision of a surgeon. He ate with a calm, deliberate rhythm, completely unbothered by the spectacle he had just orchestrated. The chef himself had brought out the tasting menu, an apology on a plate. There were seared scallops floating in a saffron reduction, truffle-infused risotto that smelled like the earth after rain, and the beef, marbleized and glistening. Nikolai poured more of the 1982 Chateau Latour into Claire's glass. The dark red liquid swirled, catching the dim ambient light. "Drink," Nikolai commanded softly, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the table. "You are shaking, Claire. The wine will steady you. It is good wine. It tastes better when you know you took it from the hand of an enemy." Claire reached for the glass, her fingers trembling. She took a sip. It was complex, earthy, and unlike anything she had ever tasted. It tasted like power. "Mr. Volkov," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? You could have ruined Sterling without me. You have security. You have billions. Why did you let me sit here?" Nikolai set his knife and fork down. He wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, his movements slow and methodical. He looked at her, and for the first time, Claire saw the immense weight behind his icy blue eyes. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was isolation. "Do you know how many people speak to me every day, Claire?" Nikolai asked. I assume many," she replied. "Hundreds," Nikolai corrected. "Lawyers, bankers, politicians, generals. They all speak to me. They use big words. They use flattery. They smile with their teeth, but their eyes are always calculating. They are always wondering, how much can I take from the Russian before he notices?" He leaned forward, the candlelight flickering across his bearded face. "I came here tonight, not just to test Sterling, but to find something I lost a long time ago. Truth. I wanted to see if there was anyone in this city of glass towers who still knew the meaning of honor." He gestured around the opulent room, his hand sweeping over the empty tables and the cowering staff. "Sterling failed in 5 minutes. Jacob failed the moment I walked in the door. But you stood between a billionaire and a beggar. You risked your livelihood to protect the dignity of a stranger who could offer you nothing but a headache. That, Claire, is not a skill. That is a soul. And souls like yours are becoming extinct." Claire lowered her eyes, blushing. "I just did what was right. My mother raised me to believe that you don't kick a man when he's down." "Your mother," Nikolai repeated, latching on to the word. "Tell me about her. You mentioned she was sick." Claire hesitated. It was painful to talk about, a raw wound she kept hidden under her apron. But looking at Nikolai, she felt a strange compulsion to be honest. "She has kidney failure," Claire said, her voice cracking. "Stage 4. She needs dialysis 3 times a week. The insurance company calls it a pre-existing condition and fights us on every claim. I was studying linguistics at Columbia. I wanted to be a translator for the UN, but I had to drop out. The tuition money went to the hospital. Now I work double shifts here to pay for her medication." She looked up, her eyes wet. "So, you see, Mr. Volkov, I'm not a hero. I'm just desperate. I protected you because I know what it feels like to be looked down on. I know what it feels like to be invisible." Nikolai listened in silence. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He simply absorbed the information, processing it like a strategic report. "You wanted to be a translator," Nikolai mused. "You have a gift for it. When you translated my insults to sterling, you didn't just repeat the words. You carried the intent. You captured the menace. Most translators are too polite. They soften the blow. You delivered the punch." He reached into the inner pocket of his frayed coat. For a second, Claire thought he was reaching for a weapon, but he pulled out a sleek, leather-bound checkbook and a heavy fountain pen. "I have a problem, Claire," Nikolai said, uncapping the pen. "My company, Volkov Industries, operates in 12 time zones. I deal with American oil barons, German engineers, and Chinese manufacturers. I have an army of translators, but I do not trust them. They are afraid of me. They tell me what they think I want to hear. They filter the world for me." He began to write. The scratch of the nib against the paper was the only sound at the table. "I need a voice," he continued, not looking up. "I need a head of international liaison. Someone who will travel with me. Someone who will sit in the boardroom and tell me, 'Nikolai, this man is lying to you,' or 'Nikolai, this contract is a trap.' I need someone who is not impressed by wealth, someone who is not afraid of bullies. I need you." Claire's breath hitched. "Me? But I didn't finish my degree. I'm a waitress. I don't know the first thing about the energy sector." "I can hire 100 experts to teach you about oil and gas," Nikolai said, ripping the check from the book with a crisp, tearing sound. "I cannot teach someone to have integrity. I cannot teach someone to be brave." He slid the check across the pristine white tablecloth. It stopped right next to her hand. "This is your hiring bonus," Nikolai said. "Consider it an advance on your first year's salary." Claire looked down. She expected a generous tip, maybe $1,000, maybe 5. She saw the number, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. 250,000 tanuosu. She blinked, sure she was hallucinating. She looked again. It was real. $250,000. "This," Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "This is a mistake. You added too many zeros." "It is not a mistake," Nikolai said firmly. "That will cover your mother's medical bills for the foreseeable future. It will pay off your student loans, and it will buy you a new wardrobe, because where we are going, you will need something warmer than that apron. We fly to London tomorrow morning. Sterling lost the deal, so I must find a new partner in the North Sea." Tears spilled over Claire's cheeks, hot, fast, and uncontrollable. The crushing weight that had been sitting on her chest for 3 years, the fear of the mailbox, the fear of the ringing phone, the fear of losing her mother, suddenly evaporated. "I don't know what to say," she sobbed. "Say yes," Nikolai said, a small, genuine smile finally touching his lips, "and say you will quit this job immediately." "Yes," Claire whispered, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I accept." "Good," Nikolai said. "Now, dry your eyes. The vultures are returning." Nikolai nodded toward the kitchen doors. Jacob was emerging. The manager looked like a man walking to the gallows, but he was trying to salvage the situation with a desperate, oily charm. He carried a bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes on a silver tray. He approached the table, his smile trembling. "Mr. Volkov!" "Sir!" Jacob chimed, his voice cracking. "I see you and Claire have come to an understanding. I just wanted to bring out our finest champagne. On the house, of course, a toast to your visit, and perhaps we can forget the unpleasantness with Mr. Sterling." Jacob reached for the bottle to pour, but Nikolai's hand shot out and covered the glass. "Do not pour that," Nikolai said. His voice was no longer the warm rumble he had used with Clare. It was cold steel. Jacob froze. "Sir, I am not drinking with you," Nikolai said, staring up at the manager, "and I am not forgetting anything." He stood up, his massive frame towering over the small, sweating manager. "Claire is leaving with me," Nikolai announced, his voice carrying to the entire room. "She is no longer your employee. She is now an executive at Volkov Industries." Jacob's jaw dropped. He looked at Claire, who was wiping her eyes and standing up, finding a confidence she didn't know she had. "But she has a shift tomorrow," Jacob stammered. "She can't just leave. It's against protocol." Nikolai laughed, a dark, humorless sound. "Protocol? You talk of protocol after you tried to throw a paying customer into the rain? After you let that swine Sterling abuse your staff?" Nikolai took a step closer to Jacob. Jacob shrank back, nearly dropping the tray. "Listen to me closely, little man," Nikolai growled. "I have purchased the debt on this building. My lawyers finalized it 10 minutes ago while I was eating my risotto. Technically, I am your landlord now." Jacob went pale as a sheet. "What? If I find out that you withheld 1 single penny of Claire's tips," Nikolai pointed a thick finger at Jacob's chest, "or if I ever hear that you treated another employee with the disrespect you showed us tonight, I will evict this restaurant. I will turn this skyscraper into a shelter for the stray dogs of New York, and I will personally hire you to clean the kennels. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Jacob squeaked, terror in his eyes. "Crystal clear, Mr. Volkov. No problems. She is the best. We love her." Nikolai turned his back on him, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than a gnat. He turned to Claire and offered his arm. It was a courtly, old-world gesture. "Shall we, Miss Clare?" Claire looked at the table one last time. She saw her apron, folded neatly next to the empty plates. It was the symbol of her servitude, her silence, and her struggle. She reached out and touched the fabric one last time, then pulled her hand away. "Yes, Nikolai," she said, her voice strong. "We shall." She looped her arm through his. The rough wool of his coat felt better than the finest silk. Together, they walked through the center of the restaurant. They walked past the table where the bankers were staring with their mouths open. They walked past Jessica, the head hostess, who looked like she might faint from envy. They walked past the kitchen, where the cooks were giving Claire a silent thumbs up. Claire held her head high. She wasn't the invisible girl anymore. She was the woman who spoke the language of the wolf, and in return, the wolf had given her the world. As the heavy oak doors swung open, the cool night air of Manhattan rushed in to meet them. The rain had stopped. The city lights below shimmered like diamonds, not the cold, hard diamonds of a jewelry store, but bright, guiding stars. A black limousine with diplomatic flags pulled up to the curb. A driver hurried out to open the door. Nikolai paused before getting in. He looked at Claire. "One rule, Claire," he said, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "Yes, sir," she asked. "In my company, we work hard, but I allow my executives to wear comfortable shoes." Claire looked down at her aching feet in the cheap, worn-out Waitress flats, then back up at him. She smiled, a true, radiant smile. "I think I can live with that," she said. She stepped into the car, leaving the darkness behind, and the door closed on her old life forever. That night at the Obsidian Room became a legend in New York City. The staff still whispers about the homeless billionaire and the waitress who spoke his language. It's a powerful reminder that true worth isn't found in a designer suit or a heavy wallet. It's found in how you treat the people who can do nothing for you. Sterling lost $1 billion deal because he was blinded by arrogance. Claire gained a new life because she led with kindness and integrity. You never know who you are talking to or whose life you might change with a single act of respect. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and dramatic justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Claire's shoes? Would you have served the rude customer or ignored him? Let's talk about it down below. Thanks for watching.